everyone. Welcome to the CSD Hill Day 2026 prep webinar. I'm going to give everyone a moment to just get in. It looks like the participant count is going up and going up. I see 31, 32, 33. I'll go ahead and introduce myself while folks are coming in. I'm Natalie Mamro. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition of Skin Diseases, and I'm also a patient advocate. As you can probably see, I have alopecia universalis, which is an autoimmune disease that results in total body hair loss. And I have had this since 2001. And with that, I'm going to pull up our slide deck. All right. And for those of you who are watching later on, this is recorded and will be sent around to all of our patient advocates coming to Hill Day so that if you miss it live, you will be able to see it later on. If you have questions throughout, there will be a portion at the end of the webinar where you'll be able to ask questions. But if you have questions in between and you just don't want to forget them, feel free to add them into the chat box and we will get to them as soon as we can. And with that, I'm going to get started. Welcome to the 2026 CSD Hill Day, where we will be gathering 70 some patient advocates from around the country, all representing the spectrum of skin. We will be there from May 17th to 19th in Washington, D.C. And here is who we have on the webinar today. As I noted, it's myself. We have Kelly Barta, the President and Executive Director of ITSAN, Deanna Bartos from the National Scleroderma Foundation. Filling in for Jason is his colleague Liz from the National Psoriasis Foundation, Gabby Draper, who is at the CSD, and Caroline Dudonakis from Congressman Arrington's office out of Texas. Here's our agenda for the day. We're going to do an overview of what our Advocacy Day looks like, what advocacy is, why it's important, how to prepare your story so that you feel really ready to tell your story on Hill Day, how to share your story once you get in front of your member of Congress or staffer. We're going to go through what our legislative asks are. Those are our priorities, what we're asking our members of Congress and senators to do on behalf of the skin disease community. We're going to talk about the legislative meeting process, sort of what you should expect, what to do, what to not do, how you build a relationship with those legislative offices and staffers, how to follow up after your legislative meeting, because that's actually a really important piece and helps build that relationship. We're going to talk about the congressional staff perspective. I think a few of us here are currently working on Hill or have worked on Capitol Hill, and we're going to talk about what it's like to be on the other side of the table. We will do a mock legislative meeting so you can kind of see what a normal legislative meeting looks like. We'll share some links to advocacy resources and videos that are available on CSD's website. And then we'll have a Q&A section, and we're going to put all that together in 1 hour. I will note that everything we're going through today, we are going to go through much more in depth in Washington, D.C. on Monday, May 18th. So if you feel overwhelmed, hopefully not, or you want to learn more about the issues, you're in luck. We are going to be doing that Monday, May 18th, that afternoon at the hotel that we'll be staying at. So an overview of the CSD's Hill Day. You are not going to be alone. You are going to be meeting with your members of Congress and staffers with other patient advocates. So don't worry, you are not going to be by yourself. Remember, this is a chance to tell your personal story and to educate our elected officials about your disease and about the organizations that you represent. You're going to tell them about the ways that they can help and aligning your story with a specific ask. So how does your specific story with your skin disease relate to one of our legislative asks? And then it's going to be very brief. A lot of these meetings are 15 or 20 minutes tops, but they're incredibly impactful. So what is advocacy? Most of you have done advocacy, most likely, whether you realize it or not. When you are at the doctor's office, you are advocating for yourself. When you're calling your internet provider, because your internet is out, you are advocating for yourself. And so we are going to turn this sort of advocacy that many of us, really all of us, are likely doing into sort of a policy advocacy where we're advocating on behalf of policies that will positively impact us. And then, why is it important? So, you have a voice, your story, you're the only person who can tell your story. If the people who are making our policies don't know about our skin diseases, how on earth can they create legislation and policies around it? So, it's important for us to have a seat at the table. And that seat and that table is much stronger when we come all together as the CSD as an organization instead of just by ourselves. It also allows us to build personal relationships with legislative offices. As a former congressional staffer, I can't tell you how important it was to have the people you'd meet with year after year or every few months that you could really go to and use as a resource when you had questions about legislation that came up. You are the expert in your story. Don't ever forget that. And you should always seek to be a resource to your legislative office, your congressional member of Congress. And then finally, you have an opportunity to change history. It sounds crazy, but truly one voice can make a difference. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming, like there's so much going on in Congress and in the world, but this is your chance to really make that difference and tell your story with your skin disease family that is surrounding you. All right, moving on. How to prepare for Advocacy Day. So you want to understand what the legislative asks are, which we're going to go through, and figure out how they apply to you or people within your population. You are probably going to want to take some time to write down a personal story, your story, and practice sharing it. You can bring notes to Hill meetings. You don't have to go in blind. You are allowed to have notes in front of you. We're going to have the in-person advocacy training session, like I noted, on Monday, May 18th. And then once you meet with your group that you'll be with, you just want to get to know them, sort of prepare your order of march or who's going to speak first, who's going to be the opener. And we'll get to all that also on May 18th. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deanna Bartos from the National Scleroderma Foundation to talk to us about. Deanna, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Natalie. And I'm super excited to be here. And thank you to everyone here as well. I cannot wait to walk through crafting your story and this journey together. So first thing, what you'll see on this slide right here is just a helpful outline, but it's a powerful way and a good starting point on how to craft your story, especially when you're there sharing your own experience as a patient, a caregiver, and advocate as well. So this is your story in general. I know Natalie had covered this so greatly. Is super important, and you're the only one that can share it. It's power to inform and connect and create the change that we all want to see. So I'm just going to briefly talk about each bullet point. The first one is starting with your before. So as you can see, opening up image, and what that looks like is just beginning of a snapshot of what your life looked like before that diagnosis or before things have changed. So on the right-hand side, you'll see example statements. So for example, you may say something as before my diagnosis, I was X, Y, and Z. And then moving on to number two, so you want to share the catalyst. So that is going to be what was the moment when things had shifted for you? When did you realize something wasn't right? What did that look like? And then moving into your examples of the moment I realized something was wrong was when XYZ. And again, you're the only one that knows your story that can share that to a powerful impact. And then number three is when we'll dive into the struggle of real world impact, which is talking about your specific struggle. or individuals that you know. So in this point in crafting your story, this is where you'll describe the real life impact physically, emotionally, or even financially as well. This is often the most human part of connecting this part of your story. So you'll be able to share examples as of the hardest part living with this situation has been. And you definitely want to make sure you dive into this part of your story because it's important for them to realize and recognize what you've been going through on your journey. And then number four, this is the midturn. So when things had taken the wrong turn, right? Highlighting the turning point. So you want to reiterate when was the moment where things got especially difficult, emphasize the urgency and the reality that you were facing in this experience. And then in conjunction with that, the example is the current policy fails me because. And then you'll go deep dive into that. And we're here to help you with this as well. And I know, as Natalie said, like we'll be covering the legislative asks, but we're here to help you when you get into this outline. And then number five, a new hope. So hope is super important to every single one of us going through this journey, right? We're all here for a reason. So what has helped you? What changes or what asks can help make things better for you or even others? It may be your family. So this is where you really can dive into if this specific policy has changed, I could do X, Y, and Z and relating it to that legislative ask with your journey. And then lastly, number six is ending with a call to action. So you'll want to close with what you want your audience to do. And then again, this is your chance to turn your story into true impact. So how can they help? And then an example that we have is naming the number of constituents, which you could always look up in your area. But again, we're here to help you with that as well. And then I'm ready for the next
Awesome.
slide, please.
All right. Come on now. There we go.
Perfect. Okay. These are just helpful tips that we have. I'm quickly going to go over this. So number one is practicing your story. And I do want to reiterate what Natalie had stated earlier. It is okay to have notes. It's okay to have a printout. Again, you're the only one that knows your story, but it's good to have those tips in front of you and pointers in order to stay on track and help share confidently. And then adapting to your audience. So what matters most to them. Breathing, this is so important. Remember to breathe. It is okay to pause. Please remember that as well when you're practicing. And then always being cordial and respectful, even with sharing, of course, these difficult experiences that we go through. So at the end of the day, again, I just want to reiterate that your story doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real coming from you. Just speak from your experience. And then you also, at this time, are giving permission to other people to listen, learn, and take action. So it's super exciting and great. So that's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Deanna.
Thanks, Natalie.
All right. All right. I'm going to just briefly go over what our legislative asks are. These are the things that we're going to be going to Capitol Hill, going to our congressional offices, asking them to make these changes or to do these things. The first one is to support medical research. So let's fund the National Institutes of Health and the National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases, also known as NIAMS. We are going to ask them to join the Congressional Skin Disease Caucus, and we're going to ask them to co-sponsor two bills, the Safe Step Act and the Help Co-Pays Act. And we're going to go into all of these into a little bit of detail right now, and again, into more detail at our in-person advocacy event on Monday, May 18th. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Olivia Casey at the Autoimmune Association to talk about the importance of robust NIH funding. The floor is yours, Olivia.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you, everybody, for being here. This is truly an honor. If I lag a little bit, it's windy here, and unfortunately, my Zoom gets blown away. So I thought I would set the stage with why is the NIH so important to us? I mean, why are we lobbying for that so heavily? Because it seems like research should be done everywhere. Well, the reason that we're interested and why we are so heavily lobbying on behalf of the NIH is that, I should say advocating on behalf of the NIH, not lobbying, that every treatment that you have ever taken, 99.9% of it started with bench research at the NIH. So if we lose that research, we're going to lose the treatments. So almost everything we do is funded by that. And so NIH funding is not an abstract. It directly relates to and correlates to how we get better treatments. So it's the NIH is kind of arcane. It's 27 institutes and centers, and each of them were started at different periods of time historically. And they specifically study organ, they're almost all organ specific. So for us, for skin diseases, it's the National Institutes of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases, better known as NIAMS, which is good because I can't say that all those words together very often, very long. So NIAMS is where skin diseases start. Now, that does not include cancer. There is a Cancer Research Institute, but that's separate from us. Roughly a large percentage of research dollars, and on Monday we'll go into that, of where the dollars actually go. All the institutes and centers, many of them do touch skin disease, but NIAMS is our home. That is where most of us obtain cures for what we're doing or treatments. So NIAMS primarily supports the basic research on how skin and immune systems work together. They do clinical trials, they develop new therapies, and one of the things that we all know, which is skin diseases are not just cosmetic. It's not just you wear it on your skin and you can get over it. It doesn't work like that. They're chronic, they're inflammatory, and they impact our quality of life, and they impact our mental health, our ability to work and function. So I'm going to go back to what Deanna said about your story. That's key. People need to understand, no, it's not just it looks bad or I'm uncomfortable with it. It impacts your life, and that I think is critical. And that goes from everything for psoriasis and atopic dermatitis, vitiligo. There's a lot of rare skin diseases and connective diseases that affect the connective tissue also are skin diseases, and they also can be verbalized. And NIAMS doesn't work alone. They work with environmental triggers, and that's like with NIEHS. They work with the Association of Aging, which is the National Institute on Aging. So we don't experience our diseases in silos, and research is not in silos. So we need to include that in our thinking when we move forward with that. And breakthroughs in one of the other institutes and centers can also impact skin diseases. So we want to make sure that we're inclusive in our language, although we stay focused on NIAMS. And the NIH funding is really the foundation of our medical progress. So almost all our therapies, like I said, 99.9% tie back specifically to NIH-supported research. And NIH supports the entire pipeline. And by that I mean, and what's so critical is that part of research, and we have a researcher here who can support this, part of research is when it fails. It's not all of it's going to be 100%. Having the luxury to fail is what makes it succeed, because that failure tells us that isn't going to work. So without that, a private company is not going to have that kind of bandwidth. That's not what they do. That's not what they're in the business to do. That's why this is so critical, that ability and the understanding that not all research is going to succeed. It will fail. And that failure informs the success. And I defer to better minds amongst us, but that's a key point of what we want to do. And without sustained funding, we don't have the clinical trials. They're either delayed or they're stopped. And we can go into that a little more detail on Monday, but that's essential. Clinical trials are essential, but there's different types of clinical trials. But without those clinical trials, we never get to the end game and we never get to the treatments. We have in the pipeline, the young researcher is critical to us because it takes a lifetime. There's an arc of research integrity. And without those young researchers, they're not going to be doing the research in 5, 10, 15 years that are going to lead to the treatments that are down the line. We have to think about the future. And it's imperative that we preserve that funding for those young researchers because they are going to be our future. And the other thing is when you stop and start, you lose that momentum. It's just like in a car. We lose that momentum. We don't want to lose that momentum. We're so close. And think of where we are now with AI, with machine learning, there's so much learning language models that we can deploy. But if we don't have that research, we're not going to be able to take advantage of that. So that's partially why we are so adamant that we continue with our research there. And for us, this is what our future is. This is what's going to lead to the cures that will lead to the treatments. And finally, I want to say, and this is specific to NIAMS. One of the things we have to remember, and I go back to what Deanna said, it's your story. When you're framing your story, remember that these agencies, these ICs are there for you. They are there to help you in the future. So align that and think of that. And we want to make sure that we mirror that as we reflect on how we want to impress them. Now, on Monday, I'm going to go through specifically how all of this ties back to your area, to your region. I mean, within your town and state and city, there's research that's going on, most likely that impacts whoever you're calling with, whoever that congressperson is. You can directly refer to, hey, this is research in our town. It's not only the research, it's income, because research is quite lucrative and it has a lot of impact. So we can go through all that on Monday, but I did want to set the stage for why the NIH, why don't we focus on something else? So I hope that kind of gives you a broad scope. And with that, I'll turn it back.
Thank you, Olivia. That was a wonderful preview of the importance of NIH and why it's important to all of us as skin disease patients. And next up, we are going to turn it over to Kelly Barta of ITSAN. She is going to talk to us about the creation of a Congressional Skin Disease Caucus. This is a new ask that we are making for the first time ever for Hill Day, so it's really exciting. And with that, I'll hand it over to Kelly.
Hey everyone, it's so wonderful to be here. I saw a lot of names that I did not recognize in our participants today, so I'm super excited to meet you. I don't know if this is your first time on Capitol Hill, but if it is, you're in for a real treat. It's going to be amazing, and I can't wait to meet you there. So let's talk about a Congressional Skin Caucus. What in the world is a Congressional Caucus? So a Congressional Caucus is an informal group of U.S. senators or representatives who unite together to promote shared legislative goals, interests, or policy agendas. They allow lawmakers to collaborate on specific issues outside the official committee system that's set up, often acting as bipartisan, which means we're bringing together Democrats and Republicans to vote together on certain issues and push things ahead. So their purpose is to raise awareness, influence legislation, and build support for issues ranging from foreign policy to industry-specific concerns. And in our case, it's going to be about skin disease issues. So while they're not formally tasked with passing legislation, they are highly influential in shaping the congressional agenda. So it's really important that we get this group of people together who care about skin disease, to help us really move forward what we're trying to get done on Capitol Hill. So our ask specifically is that this proposed caucus would serve as an education and policy-focused forum for members of Congress and staff, offering briefings, which is a way for them to just share information about the topics, resources, and collaboration opportunities to improve patient access to affordable, high-quality care and advance evidence-based policy solutions. So this caucus specifically would raise awareness, foster bipartisan, like I was saying, both Democrat and Republican engagement, and support legislation that improves outcomes for individuals and families affected by skin disease. And this is something that we've been working on for several years. It takes a lot of outreach and a lot of conversations to get these very, very busy members of Congress to say yes. So we're excited to bring this forward this year. And there already has been some activity. The CSD has reached out to a number of different offices, and I wanted to list them here in case you live in one of these states and one of these people is your representative, because you can kind of drive that point home like, hey, we've already been talking to you about this. Don't you want to join? I wanted to mention too that the CSD is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So like I said, a lot of these people are very, very busy. If you can let them know, listen, the CSD is going to handle a lot of the workload for you, but this is just a way for you to help support us as your constituent and moving things that really matter to us along and in terms of skin disease. So the list of people that has been reached out to. So pay attention if you live in one of these states, and not sure if you've looked into who your representative is yet, but if you haven't, there's a way to do that. I'm sure that we'll talk about that later. But we have from Missouri, Representative Onder, from Tennessee, Representative Harshbarger, from Ohio, Representative Balderson, from Indiana, Representative Shreve, from Pennsylvania, Representative Fitzpatrick, from Iowa, Representative Miller Meeks, and two from Florida, Representative Neil Dunn and Representative Billy Rockus. I believe that's how you say it. So I am going to hand it back over to Natalie for any other specifics that she would like to share about the caucus itself.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll go into this later on the 18th, but we have three members of Congress who have agreed to help be leaders of the Skin Disease Caucus, and we're looking to grow it basically. So our ask is going to be, please join the Congressional Skin Disease Caucus. And with that, thank you, Kelly, and I am going to hand it over to Liz. And I'm so sorry, Liz, I did not ask you how to pronounce your last name. So I'm going to let you pronounce your last name. Liz is with the National Psoriasis Foundation. She's going to talk to us about our next ask, which is the Safe Step Act.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Shambita. I'm with the National Psoriasis Foundation, and I'm really excited to talk to you about the Safe Step Act as one of the asks for our Hill Day coming up in a few weeks. So I'm sure many of you have already experienced step therapy or know people who have in your life. It's also sometimes known as fail first. And it is essentially a prior authorization practice that insurance companies use where they require a patient to try and fail on one or more medications or other treatments before they will cover the treatment initially selected by the patient and their doctor. Patients, in many cases, are required to use these preferred medications for 2, 3, sometimes more months, prove failure, and in some cases also do this for multiple medications before they gain access to the one that their provider originally prescribed. And the reason why we find this practice challenging in many chronic disease populations is because patients often experience irreversible disease progression while they are moving through these steps. Or they'll reduce their medication adherence because of side effects, or they know it's not going to work. So the sort of like mental kind of burden that comes with that. In many cases, people lose body function or their symptoms flare sort of very significantly. And there's also been quite a bit of research done looking at the fact that in many cases, these step therapy protocols don't even align with clinical practice guidelines. So in our space in psoriasis, there's been research done that's found that step therapy protocols are more stringent or stricter than 99% of step therapy protocols are stricter than clinical guidelines. So there's really that mismatch between what the sort of medical community knows is necessary for these patient groups and what the insurance companies are really requiring patients to do. So the Safe Step Act is a bipartisan sort of common sense bill that creates a clear, medically reasonable and expedient exceptions process. So it's important to know it doesn't ban the process of step therapy. What it says instead is that there are certain scenarios where step therapy is not appropriate for a particular patient. And so it's really putting into law this kind of clear exception process. And the bill says that if a patient has already tried and failed the drug they're being asked to use, that should be a category for an exception. The second category is if delaying treatment will cause irreversible consequences. The third is if there is knowledge that this required drug will cause harm to the patient. So think like if you're allergic to an ingredient in the drug, for example. The fourth is if taking the required drug will prevent the patient from working or fulfilling other activities of daily living. And then finally, if the patient is stable on their current medication, sort of not sort of forcing them off of a medication they're stable on. And the last element of the legislation is sort of setting out a timeline. So it says that insurance plans are required to respond to an exceptions request most of the time within 72 hours for kind of like a standard request. If it is an emergency, then they have to respond within 24 hours. So that is the bread and butter of the Safe Step Act. So I will turn it back over to you, Natalie.
Thank you, Liz. That was great. And many of you may have experienced the step therapy or fail first therapy in your own lives. And this is, if you have, certainly think about how you can weave that into your story. All right, up next, we are going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about the Help Insure Lower Patient or HELP Copays Act. So, I'll give an example of sort of what this is about. It's called copay accumulator programs. It sounds complicated, but what it is, and this is a true story. I, for many years, was on a medication that was quite expensive, and there was no generic available to me. And so the pharmaceutical company provided me with a like a copay card or a coupon card where I could take it to my pharmacy every month. And instead of paying hundreds of dollars, I paid $25 out of pocket as part of my copay. And then the pharmaceutical company paid the rest basically on my behalf. So that seemed to be going fine. But then about 9 months into having this copay accumulator coupon card, it ran out. It expired. So my copays skyrocketed up to the hundreds of dollars. And so that was difficult. But then to add insult to injury, it turns out that the money that the financial provider, whether that's a charitable organization or the pharmaceutical company that's providing you with the coupon card, that money they were paying to my insurance company was not counting towards my out-of-pocket costs or deductible. And that is sort of a double whammy hit, right? You are having to pay these very high copays when you go to the pharmacy, and then the money that you thought that your copay card, your coupon card, was going towards your deductible actually wasn't. And so what this bipartisan, again, there's Republicans and Democrats on it, what this bipartisan legislation does is it ensures that any copay assistance you receive, whether it's from a manufacturer, a pharmaceutical company, or a charitable organization, that assistance is counted towards your out-of-pocket maximum or deductible. And that's sort of the bread and butter of it. And that's something, like I said, that I have personally experienced. We have a fantastic presenter from the AIDS Institute, Rachel Klein, who is much more knowledgeable on this legislation and issue than I am. And she's going to be presenting to our group on Monday, May 18th, and we'll really delve into more detail. But that's sort of the basics around it. And with that, I'm going to move on to the next issue, and this is pharmacy benefit PBMs reforms. So some background on this is those of you who have advocated with the CSD before probably are like, oh, PBM reforms, we've heard of this before. For many years, this was part of our legislative asks. And we want to share the wonderful news that there have been some victories on PBM reforms in the past year or less. So what the work that you all have done previously, those of you who've done this before on the Hill, your voices have been heard, continue to be heard. We're seeing progress, And we actually have taken PBM reforms off of our legislative asks for this year because there has been progress. But I want to hand it over to Caroline Dudinakis from Congressman Jody Arrington's office. And she's going to give us an overview of what PBMs are, the progress we've made, and sort of what we still need to see get done in order to have like a full victory. Caroline, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie. Hello, everybody. So excited to be here with you all today. As Natalie mentioned, I am coming to you live from Capitol Hill with Chairman Jody Arrington. We're West Texas, Texas 19. Just short background on my boss. He's chairman of the Budget Committee. That's why I refer to him as chairman. He is also a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and we're one of the committees on the Hill that has jurisdiction over healthcare. Specifically, we do a lot with the tax side of healthcare. So real fun stuff. But excited to talk to you about PBMs. I know many of you guys know the term pharmacy benefit manager, PBMs. You know a little bit about that. I will just give a very brief overview of what they are. You'll hear them be called the middleman, and they truly are. What they do is they manage the prescription drug benefits on behalf of the health insurers. They also manage it on behalf of employers as well. What they do is they negotiate prices and rebates with drug manufacturers. They create lists of covered medication. What those are called, the lists are called formularies, and they also contract with pharmacies. They also receive payments from insurance companies, and they charge those insurance companies the reimbursement rates. So what happens is when you go and fill your prescription, the PBM will determine how much you pay. It will also determine how much the pharmacy is reimbursed. And what the PBM bases that patient payment on, it's based on the drug's list price. So the amount you pay at the pharmacy, the co-payment or co-insurance, that is based primarily on the drug's list price. But what you're not seeing behind the scenes is that the pharmacy benefit manager will actually negotiate rebates with the drug manufacturers, which means that the drug manufacturers will pay a negotiated amount of money to the PBMs to ensure that their drugs stay on the list that I mentioned before, the formulary. So what the manufacturers are doing is paying a slight amount negotiated between the PBM and the drug manufacturer to make sure their drugs stay top of mind for those PBMs. What you don't see that price. So essentially you are paying the full price when the PBM will receive that drug at a discounted price. So as you can see there, I know you guys are all very well aware that there is just a total lack of transparency between the PBM and what we are seeing as the consumer or as the beneficiary. So what my boss has done, and we are excited to see this get passed in February through the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2026. He passed a bill called within that Consolidated Appropriations, we passed a bill called the Better Deals for Lower Prices Act. And what this did was provide transparency for employers, so they are able to see the net price from the PBMs. So they are able to negotiate a little bit better when deciding what drugs their employees should have covered. So that is just a small step, but a step in the right direction for that transparency. There is still a lot more that needs to be done on the transparency side. Up here on the Hill as well, we are also seeing a lot of talk about what is called vertical integration. And essentially what that is, you will see insurance companies own the insurance company, the PBM, and the pharmacy as well. So an example of this is the insurance company Aetna. They own CVS Caremark, which is the PBM, and they also own all of the CVS pharmacies. So what you are seeing happen is they are all steering, the insurance company is steering the PBMs and the beneficiaries all to the CVS pharmacies. They're just making sure all of the business stays within them. So this is something that my boss is very passionate about kind of fixing and finding a solution for. And I know many other bosses and many other members of Congress, between Ways and Means Committee, Energy and Commerce Committee, Education and Workforce, many committees are working on how can we kind of break these up and kind of stop this vertical integration. So that is kind of the trend that we are seeing here now. We just want to focus on more transparency. I also want to point out that there is a lot of consolidation within the market. Right now, there are three PBMs that control 80% of the drugs on the market right now. So that is going to be CVS Caremark, Optum Rx, and Express Scripts. Right now, we are also seeing the Federal Trade Commission or the FTC kind of work to actually, there's quite a few lawsuits right now from the FTC for Express Mark or Express. You guys heard them the first time. There's three big PBNs. There's a few lawsuits from the FTC because of unfair pricing and a lot of antitrust issues. So there is work that is being done from the congressional level, but also from the FTC to kind of break up this vertical integration, but also just make sure that these large PBMs are being fair players within the market and allowing for better prices. So that's kind of where we are now. But like I said, there is still much more to go. And I know all of the work you guys have done has been so amazing. And I also want to echo something that Natalie said earlier. Your meetings with congressional staffers, they may be 15, they may be 20 minutes, but it really is just so essential to hear every single story behind every single bill, every single piece of legislation. There's a face to it, there's a story to it. And really, whatever you guys tell us, we are right in the ears of our bosses. We are right talking to them. So really what you guys are doing, the advocacy work you guys are doing is just so important. So I really appreciate being invited here. And Natalie, thank you very much. And
Thank you,
that is all for me.
Caroline. We know how busy you are, and so we appreciate you taking time out of the craziness to come talk to us and tell us a little bit more about PBMs and the important work that you all are doing, and that the victories we've seen thus far, in part because of the work our patient advocates have done the past few years on Capitol Hill. So thank you, Caroline. I understand if you have to step off, that's totally fine. Um, let's see, with that, we're going to just do a quick overview of what the legislative asks are. So number one, as Olivia mentioned, we're going to ask our members of Congress to support robust funding for the National Institutes of Health. We are going to ask them to support the Congressional Skin Disease Caucus. And we are going to ask them to co-sponsor the Safe Step Act and the Help Co-Pays Act. And when we say co-sponsor, it means that they sign their name onto the legislation. They are explicitly saying, we support this, not just, yeah, it sounds okay, but no, we're going to sign on as a co-sponsor of these bills. That's what we want to ask. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Gabby Draper. She is our policy director at the CSD, and she's going to give us some background on what to expect from your legislative meetings. Gabby, take it away.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you to everyone for being here today. I will briefly just touch on some do's and don'ts for your Hill meetings. And yeah, we can jump right in. So, first things first, try to review your schedule as much as possible. A lot of times we see day of changes, and we are working with Soapbox, who will make sure you are kept up to date on any last minute changes. But just try to have an idea of where you're going next, and that can help alleviate any stress during the day. And on that note, always encourage people to arrive early. I have uh, fallen fate to the lines lately on the Hill, so try to, we'll make sure that everyone is at the Hill with plenty of time to get through security. But even when you're trying to find where your next meeting is, give yourself a couple of extra minutes. And, if you get there early, a lot of times they'll offer you some water or a snack, and you can look around the office for some fun things. So just try to be there as early as possible. And if you are running late, make sure to give the office a call and let them know you're on the way. During the meeting, really just want to stress, try to stay on topic. A lot of times, sometimes you may have something in common with the staffer, which is great because then you can chat a little bit and get to know them. But try to keep that brief, because remember that, you are there to share your story and really push for these legislative asks. And so try to just stay with your talking points and any notes that you bring, refer to those as you need. As mentioned earlier, it's completely fine to have written notes. That's welcomed. I go to meetings with written notes because I tend to get off topic. So, use those resources as you need, and don't worry about going in there with the whole spiel prepared. It's very conversational. And then, of course, leave a one pager at the end of your meeting. These will be in your welcome folders, so don't worry about, having to get those together yourself. But make sure to share that at the end of your meeting so that just in case the staffer is super interested in the details, they don't get too carried away reading the one pager and not listening to your story. And then, of course, thank the legislator and staffer for their time and make sure to snap a photo on your way out. And sometimes, a lot of times, the staffer will join you in the photo. So if they're willing, see if they want to join. But this is a great opportunity to document this experience and, use social media to amplify the discussions that you have in the meeting. So with that, we can go over to some things to stay away from. Okay, so a couple of things to try to avoid. During the meeting, you're going to be in a group. Make sure that you work with one another, have an idea of how your flow is going to go, and you'll have time to discuss that on Monday with your group. But try not to talk over another attendee, or leave the meeting. If you have your phone there, please make sure it's on silent. You need to be fully present for the meeting because that staffer there is fully present and ready to listen to you. And then, also don't worry about getting through all the asks. Sometimes it can be a little stressful if you're crunched for time or if, maybe your staffer has a really busy schedule that day that you're meeting with and they may be needing to cut the meeting a little short. It's okay if you don't get to everything. Of course, try to, but if not, that leave behind that you share with them will have all the information they need to know. And then it also gives an opportunity, if they have questions or want to follow up on something, that's a great opportunity for you to be in their email inbox and continue that conversation later. And so on that note, if you get a question that you don't know the answer to, don't worry. I love when I get questions I can't answer because it's a great opportunity to say, I will follow up. And then am in their email. I'm continuing that conversation and really helps you position yourself as a resource for that office. And, as mentioned, sometimes the staffer, the legislator you meet with, they may need to cut the meeting short. Please don't be offended. As mentioned by Caroline earlier, when they are there to hear from you. They are devoting that time to you, and sometimes it can be a busy day and they may not have the full 30 minutes. And then, of course, just try to remember that you are the expert. Try not to get too anxious. I know it can be daunting, but you are who they want to hear from. And there's no, I guess, right way to do a Hill meeting. So just go in, share your story, and it'll be great. So I'll pass it back over to Natalie from there. Thank you.
Great. So I think Gabby went over a lot of this, but after your meeting, you want to make sure to try to ask the staffer if you can take a picture with your group and with them, and then post that on social media. Um, you want to email with the staffer afterwards to say thank you, to answer any questions that they may have. And then again, don't give up. There's thousands of bills that are introduced in Congress every year. These things take time. It's really a long game. And so you're really beating the advocacy drum year after year after year. So don't be discouraged if you don't see change immediately. And with that, I'm going to go to the next one, which is the congressional staff perspective, which we heard a little bit from Caroline. I worked for a member of Congress on Capitol Hill from 2012 to 2015, and I was managing a huge policy portfolio, including Social Security, education, agriculture, transportation, natural resources, And I say all that to say I was a jack of many trades and a master of none. So again, we keep saying this, but we want you to remember that you really are the expert on your issue. It can feel intimidating to meet with these staffers, but they really know just a little bit about a lot of things generally. They are not the experts on your issue and your disease. Um, We've also said this, but congressional staffers are taking up to a dozen or more constituent meetings a day. And so you want to find a way to really connect with them if you can. A lot of members of Congress hire staffers from their state or from their congressional district. And so something I always loved was when I was working for the member of Congress and I'd have a constituent meeting and I would always ask them, "Hey, or they would ask me usually, "Hey, are you from the state or are you from I live in Milwaukee." They'd say, "Are you from Milwaukee?" And then oftentimes, there's like 3 degrees of separation a lot of times. So they went to high school with my aunt, or they cheer for the same football team as I do. And these are good ways to make just a personal connection, and it's a good way for them to remember you. But again, you don't want to get totally off topic on those, but it's good to try to make that personal connection. And then finally, facts and figures and statistics, those all have a role in trying to convince a member of Congress or their staff to act a certain way. But nothing is more powerful than your heartfelt personal story and um, the constituents and the meetings that I remember from 10, 15 years ago are not the ones that brought in charts and pie charts and graphs, but it's the people who actually were coming because their lives were personally impacted by the policy that we were making in Congress. Um, and so next up, we're going to do a mock legislative meeting. So Gabby and I are going to pretend that we're in a congressional meeting, and this is to just give you an idea of sort of what a typical congressional meeting looks like. And so in this instance, Gabby is going to be the congressional Hill staffer, and I'm going to be the patient. My name in this case is going to be Sarah for funsies. So with that, do you want to start, Gabby?
Yep, I'm ready. Hi, Sarah. Welcome and thank you for coming to meet with me today. How can I help you?
Thank you so much for meeting with me. Are you a native Wisconsinite by any chance?
I am. I actually grew up just outside of Milwaukee.
Oh, wow, me too. Did you see the Brewers game last night? I cannot believe they lost in the final inning. What a game.
Yeah, I love the Brewers. My family and I actually always had season tickets to the games growing up. It's such a small world.
It really is. Oh my gosh. Well, it's fantastic to meet another Wisconsinite and another Brewers fan. And with that, I'll say my name is Sarah, and I'm here today as someone living with alopecia, which is an autoimmune disease that results in hair loss. In my case, I started losing my hair when I was 14 years old. And it slowly progressed until I lost every hair on my body when I was 22 years old. Alopecia affects about 2% of the population, which means that approximately 40,000 of the Congresswoman's constituents have some form of alopecia. And I'm here today to share my story with you and to ask for some policy changes that would make a positive effect on my life and on the lives of the 84 million Americans with a skin disease.
Wow, thank you for sharing your story with me. What can the Congresswoman do to help?
Yeah, thank you for listening. First, I'd like to note that my alopecia is not merely cosmetic. In the 8 years that I was losing my hair, and in some of the years afterwards, I experienced anxiety, depression, shame, guilt, and panic attacks. Losing my hair felt like losing a limb. It was a piece of my identity. And I'm so grateful for the treatments available now to those with alopecia. However, when my doctor prescribed me medicine that would help me possibly regrow my hair, my insurance required me to fail several different cheaper drugs first before they would cover the cost of the prescribed medicine. And during those months that my care was delayed, I experienced serious mental health effects that ultimately led to me losing my job, spending less time with my family due to my increasing depression, and it resulted in adverse physical and mental side effects as well.
That sounds really frustrating, and I'm so sorry to hear that. Are there specific changes that you're hoping Congress will consider?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I'm hoping that the Congresswoman will co-sponsor the Safe Step Act. And this is a bipartisan bill, and it would limit harmful step therapy practices, which is what I just described to you, by helping patients like me access the treatment that our doctor recommends without being forced to try ineffective treatments first.
Got it. How do these step therapy requirements affect patients overall?
Yeah, that's a really good question. They create fear, uncertainty, and sometimes real serious clinical harm. As I mentioned earlier, skin diseases are more than just skin deep. They're not just cosmetic. Skin disease patients should not have to fight their insurance company at the same time they're navigating treatments for their disease. And for people who don't have the time, resources, or support to navigate appeals, barriers like step therapy can cause serious physical and mental harm.
I understand. I'll make sure to bring this up to my boss. Is there anything else that you'd like me to mention?
Yeah, I'm here today because I did have access to the right care at the right time eventually, but too many skin disease patients don't, and no one should lose precious time in their treatment because of administrative delays like fail first or step therapy. I'm really grateful for you considering co-sponsoring this bill, and I'm happy to follow up with more information or patient stories. I really want to be a resource to you, so please don't hesitate to reach out to me anytime with any questions. I'm really grateful for the work that you and the Congresswoman do on behalf of the district. Thank you for listening to my story. Go Brewers, and can I please get a picture with you outside of the office in front of the flag to post on social media?
Of
Awesome.
course.
Great. So that's an overview of what a legislative meeting will look like. Obviously, you will be in a group, so there will be more than just yourself. You'll have to take turns sharing your story. But that's a good overview of what a typical congressional meeting would look like. And with that, I'm going to talk about some of the advocacy resources that we have available to you on CSD's website. We have a huge list of personal story examples that we have collected throughout the years of skin disease patients sharing their written story, and that might help you as you start thinking about how to share your story, perhaps writing it down. Um, it's hard to take everything we've been through and put it into, a 2, 3, 4 minute top sort of story. But the more you practice writing and saying it, the easier it definitely will become. This is the link to the advocacy toolkit. It is on the website under the advocacy drop-down box. And this is my story that I've written. You can find it on the website. Another patient, Aiden, he has ectodermal dysplasia, and he has shared his story. He's been to Capitol Hill many times, and you can review this online if you're interested. And with that, I'm going to open it up for Q&A. If you have a question, you can put it into the chat box. I'm going to open it right now. There's one that says, "Thank you, Natalie and panelists, for this webinar. I live in Massachusetts, and I'm wondering if you would like us to reach out to one of our congresspeople to join the caucus or to share information about Hill Day before we meet in DC." I would say no, you don't have to do any outreach in advance. We are taking care of scheduling all of your congressional meetings. And on Monday, May 18th, you are going to hear from the organization that we contract with. Their name is Soapbox. They do all of the scheduling for our Hill meetings, and they will provide you with, what time your meetings are, what the location is, who's going to be in your meetings with you. So don't worry about any of the meetings. We have that covered on our end, and you will all find it out on Monday, May 18th. All right, it says Jeremy Hinkson, thanks so much for this briefing. It was very helpful. May we have a copy of the presentation to help prepare, please? Thanks in advance. Yep, I'm happy to send out. We will send out afterwards, either later today or later this week, to all the participants for Hill Day, a recording of this webinar as well as the PowerPoint presentation. And the hopefully you all in your email, when you were told you've been accepted to Hill Day, you received the PDF document with our legislative asks. We will send that again and you can continue to review it. All right, Debbie Alford says, might be a dumb question, but I would like, not a dumb question, there's no dumb questions. I would like some clarification on dress. Can I wear wedge sandals or are we to wear closed-toed shoes? I would say, Debbie, and for all of you, wear shoes that are comfortable. If that's a wedge sandal and you can walk around, you're going to be doing more walking probably than you realize. The buildings are not super far apart, but there is some amount of distance that you will be walking between the Senate offices are on one side of Capitol Hill and the House offices are on the other side of Capitol Hill. It is unlikely that we will be in the Capitol itself, but you will be in the office buildings to the north and the south of Capitol Hill. So there is a good amount of walking you'll have to do. As long as you have comfortable dress shoes that you can walk in throughout the entire day, it doesn't matter what kind, as long as you're not getting blisters. And on that same note, I would say it gets quite warm in DC in May. So I would consider wearing layers, having a sweater you can put on in the air conditioning, and then having something a little bit lighter as you walk around outside. And then Kristen said, this was very helpful. Thank you all for your time. Will we receive next steps after Hill Day on how to get involved at a more local level closer to home? That's a great question. And we can definitely follow up with you afterwards to talk about how to get involved on like a local level, on a state level. Many of you may not know, but you're congressional member of Congress. So you're member of Congress and your senators at the federal level, which is who we're meeting with in DC, they actually have, they're called district offices. So they also have meetings in your city and in your state. And you are very much encouraged to meet with them throughout the year in your home state, in your home city with these members of Congress. And then Ava Marie Cole says, are we still doing group shots in front of Capitol Hill? We are, and we will talk about that on Monday, May 18th. We always do a big group shot in front of the Capitol building before our meetings start, just so we can capture the magic of the moment. And then it says, thank you, Natalie, and the panelists for this informative presentation. It is my first time attending Hill Day. Is it a requirement to share a story? You do not, you only have to share as much as you're comfortable sharing. Whether that's a written story or a spoken story, you should never feel like you're sharing something that you're not comfortable sharing. It is important to share some part of your story, I would say, because that's really what's making the difference. But you should never feel uncomfortable sharing your story. And I hope that answers the question. All right, Sam, I have a new mobility problem and don't have a wheelchair or a scooter. What can I do? I will follow up with you separately, Sam, and we can talk about that. And with that, I want to be really conscientious of people's time. It is 1:03 p.m. Eastern. I'm very going to quickly put our contact information up on the screen. You will get a copy of this PowerPoint as well if you'd like to reach out to us with any individual questions. But in the meantime, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days to join us. As I said, we're going to go into more detail on Monday, May 18th in DC. We are excited to see you and to advocate with you. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye.